Hey everybody, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling, and on this show, I've got a first-time guest. I've seen him on lots of other shows talking about this wonderful book that he's got out. Mr. Bob Wegner, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, great, Tim. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on. And as Bob's shirt may indicate, he is the author behind this massive beast of a book called Max Webster High Class. This thing is scary. I have I've been doing arm curls with this thing, Bob. I mean, this is intimidating.
It
This
shows. It
is
really shows. It looks great.
this is the definitive history about this great little little known but well known Canadian band that existed for a very small space of time. And this is I don't want to undersell the point, but I don't want to oversell it either. But this is a tremendous accomplishment in documenting a band's career long before their first album was released. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty about how all this happened because it's a phenomenal piece of work. So, um, Max Webster, of course, for those that are like my age that grew up in the '80s in Canada, we all know who Kim Mitchell is. He was a household name. Kim Mitchell was a rock star in Canada. Max Webster was his band. They did 5 albums between 76 and 80, and then they disbanded. There have been a few sporadic reunions here and there, but highly influential, even though they weren't. They did fairly well in Canada as far as having some gold and platinum albums. Around the world, I think in a lot of cases they're mostly known for a long association with Rush, touring and being on the same record label, but a very, very quirky but really likable band, I think. And it's great to see. I think they're kind of getting their due. I think I've there's more people talking about Max Webster, in the corner of YouTube that I visit and occupy than I think ever before, and I think that's a great thing. So,
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Bob, I'm assuming that you're a longtime fan. Like, when did Max Webster and or Kim come up on your radar?
Oh, as a kid, because I grew up in the late '80s, early '90s, and they were on the radio playlist. So when you're that age, you hear them along with the Beatles and Pink Floyd and Sabbath and April Wine, and it's just okay. And Max Webster, they were a band, and of course, it comes to you later. You realize that just they were maybe more of a localized thing, but still they were huge in Ontario. I
Yeah.
mean, there were a ton of bands that played the Ontario bars in the 1970s after they lowered the drinking age to 18 and brought the CanCon thing in around the same time in 1971. And so there's tons of these bands, but Max Webster gets out of the bar scene and becomes a theater band, and then they can headline Maple Leaf Gardens. And then you get an hour outside of Buffalo, and who's Max? That's what it is. That's entirely the business of
Yeah.
where you get played on the radio and where you don't get played on the radio. But in Ontario, they were I'd say about as big as Rush. They were on both AM and FM radio by the late 70s, and they were everywhere. There was a giant billboard for the A Million Vacations album at Young and Dundas, and that's the kind of billboard that Pink Floyd would be on.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing to me, these bands that had regional followings that very, very well known in pockets, extremely well known in pockets. You go a little bit too far one way or the other, couldn't get arrested, so to speak. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's kind of been the same thing for Kim Mitchell as a solo artist. I mean, Go for a Soda got a little bit of airplay in the US, and I think
Mm.
Patio Lanterns did too. But other than that, it's really, really, really hard for Canadian, it's always been really hard for Canadian artists to break into the US and stay there, to break
Yeah.
in the first place and then to keep a consistent career. There's so few bands that have done it. And of course,
Yeah.
Max came up on my radar, um, not necessarily because of Kim Mitchell. I don't know if I'm not so sure if, because Much Music was very supportive. They played Kim Mitchell all the time, and they were great for Canadian artists. I'm not so sure I ever was aware of Max Webster because, as far as I know, they never did any official promo videos.
Not really. I mean, the only Max Webster video there would have been was when they were on Top of the Pops in England.
Yeah,
And that's when they sold a couple 100,000 copies of Paradise Skies.
yeah,
And because of some delightful union stipulation that said the masters had to be done in England, they were the first Canadian band to record at Abbey Road. So it's a whole other
yeah,
version of the song. That's where it's done. And so, yeah, that's the closest thing to a Max Webster music video is that they're on Top of the Pops. And in England, that was a really, really big deal because North America is so huge, but England is just it's very, very small. And you get played on Top of the Pops, and just the whole country knows you exist. Even if it's for
right.
5 seconds, that's way bigger than anything that could have happened in Canada at that time,
Yeah,
20 years before the internet. And just that's what people would talk about is who was on Top of the Pops. And Max were on that big tour with Rush and did 4 nights at Hammersmith and all that. And then they headlined a couple nights at the Marquee. And if you played the Marquee as a headliner, just you have basically you're starting to make it in England. That was a big deal for a
yeah.
Canadian band to do that. There were not many bands who did that. But it comes down to business and money. And unfortunately, they didn't get the money for their headlining tour. It was booked, it was ready to go, and the money didn't show up. And that's just that story is so ubiquitous in the music business. And but for bands as good as Max Webster, yeah, there aren't many bands like that. I mean, of course, that's a subjective opinion, but they were getting encores every night on that tour
Yeah.
as an opening act. And you can hear the recordings from it, and just it's not the little tepid golf clap. Just it
No, no,
was it was pretty exciting stuff.
yeah, no, it's pretty amazing how they did so much in such a compressed amount of time,
Yeah,
really. So I think I first heard of Max Webster in the by the late 80s when I completely dove in headfirst with Rush because they're still one of my favorite bands of all time. But I got this book about them that was written by a guy named Steve Gett called Success Under Pressure. It was like a junior high level reading book, but that's fine because that's where I was at the time. I think I was about 15 when I got it. And it mentioned that Rush teamed with this band called Max Webster for a song called Battle Scar. So that title had been in my head since that time. And it just took a few years for me to become aware that, okay, well, wait a second. The Max Webster is a band. It's not one guy. Oh, and Kim Mitchell was in that band. Okay, well, it's starting to, the picture's starting to come into focus a little bit. I don't think it was until like the mid 90s when I actually heard any songs by Max Webster. And actually, I think the first song I ever heard from them was Let Go the Line. And
sure.
I was a little confused. Again, pre-internet, people have to understand pre-internet, and this was not a band that you could just find things out about. But I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like Kim Mitchell singing.
Hmm.
But, so I had a lot to learn. I think it was, I don't know, it might have been in the late 90s. We were talking off camera about Columbia House. And so I got that Anthem CD, The Best of Max Webster. And that's when I started to hear some of these songs that I was um, reading. I bought one of Martin Popoff, our good friend Martin Popoff's first books, which was all these album reviews, and he loves Max Webster, obviously. And so I'm starting to hear songs like Hangover and Here Among the Cats and Paradise Sky. So I'm like, okay, it's different than Kim Mitchell's stuff, but it's good. And so that's when they kind of came up on my radar. And then when I heard Battle Scar, at the time that I heard it, were sort of on hiatus because it was after Test for Echo, it was after Neil Peart's twin tragedies that happened. So it was like hearing a new song by them, and it was like, wow, this is
Mhm.
awesome. And then I realized I'd heard the song because it was on the I Am a Wild Party live album with Peter Fredette singing
Yeah.
Getty's parts. I'm like, oh, that's okay. That's why that riff sounded familiar. Okay, and now it makes sense. So obviously, this is a band that, like, all country, and there weren't 1,000 channels. Everybody watched Top of the Pops. And that's where you found out about rock music. From what I understand from talking to friends of mine over in the UK, is like there was no rock radio. You got like 1 hour on a Friday night if you were lucky.
Mhm.
So for them to get to that level, yeah, You're right. It is ubiquitous. I think we've all got bands in our, you know, collections that we think, the one are the ones that got away. Like for me, that band has always been Y&T, who were huge in the Bay Area, which is where they're from, could headline big places, but they had to do they were well known in pockets. They did well in Japan. They did okay in the UK and Germany, but not in most of the states, and certainly not up here in Canada. So Max
Mm,
Webster fits that category of one of those regional bands, and I think with the internet they become sort of better known. I think that anybody that's a real serious Rush fan and has read any amount of them, inevitably you're going to read the name Max Webster. And I would
yeah.
highly encourage anybody to check it out. But if you really want to take the dive, then get this thing. Uh. Now, so I don't even know where to start with this, Bob, because not only is this a complete look into their career, but all of the tour dates and like how did you even begin to compile this? Like where did the idea like come from? Not just liking this band, but where did the book where is like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do like the final word on Max Webster and pack everything into this.
Well, basically, it starts about a decade ago, and I just started compiling the tour dates. I decided I want to start a website about all their live stuff because I was finding photography, and I just wanted a place to kind of present it all. And because there was an existing, still is an existing website, maxwebster.ca, with a very incomplete list of tour dates. But that stuff always interests me, just following a band on the road. If you love the band, just getting to know them through their listening to their live recordings. Because some bands, especially this band, the albums are good, but they were a live band. And now there's so many live recordings of them going back to when they're a bar band. Speaking of the early years you spoke about, yeah, the first album comes out in 76, but there's 3 solid years of touring before that when they're largely a bar band traveling around Ontario and Quebec, but they're starting to open for a few bands. They get on the bill with Ian Thomas, and then they start playing with Rush and then Styx, and so they start playing with other bands too. But but it's so interesting because you mentioned Battle Scar. I mean, they that was one of the earliest songs they wrote.
Yeah.
It was a 2-minute song. They were playing that as a bar band. Then they would play Joe Walsh and Zappa and Jethro Tull covers, and then they'd have these original songs of theirs that get literally no reaction when they're playing in the bars, which is so neat. So, but this stuff at that time is just so inconceivable to me because, as far as I know, this is a band that kind of starts around 1975, 76. I don't even know how far back it goes. And then I get in touch with Paul Kersey, Max Webster's drummer, who played on the first album. And people kind of see him as, oh yeah, just the first album. Just no, he did those first 3 years of touring. And back then, for those people who don't know this, just you played a lot when you were a band back then. If you were any good, you because they had no smoking laws, so that you know just it's just inconceivable now. But you could play in a bar. It'll be 6 nights a week, Monday through Saturday, and a Saturday matinee often. So 7 shows a week, and then Sunday's your travel day, and then you go to the next city for the next bar gig. But a gig wasn't a gig. A gig was typically a week at a venue. Or maybe you had split weeks where you had Monday to Thursday, and then you get Friday, and then the 2 Saturday shows, and that was your split week. And so talking to Paul Kersey, pardon me, um, he ended up writing out for me, and because he kept his diaries, so he wrote out for me in longhand their tour dates, which was in the end about 98, 99% of them. And you see all these stints in the bars, and you just realize, oh my God, they've played 500 dates before they did their first Massey Hall opening for Rush on the Fly By Night tour. And you listen to that recording of Max, and they're so unbelievably tight. And the
Yeah.
set is basically what would become the first album, and they're just completely in the pocket, but it doesn't sound over rehearsed, and somehow it still sounds spontaneous, and they stride that line, and the humor and everything, it's all there. And so when I started doing this, I just wanted to just compile their tour dates, but in the end I started talking to all the band members, and the point comes where it's just okay, I think I want to turn this into a book because there's such an interesting story with all their recording history. I mean, their first demo was done by Bob Hezrin, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
massive name. So I actually ended up meeting Ezra at one point, which is another story. Pardon me, I got a frog in the throat.
Yeah, no problem.
Uh, oh, don't edit this out. This is live, people. It's live. And
I don't edit stuff like this out. No.
oh, we nor should we. We're human people.
No.
We're human.
Yeah.
And so it kind of organically becomes this larger thing. And then I just realized, yeah, this clearly needs to become a book. And at this point, I'm kind of running this Max Webster Facebook group, and you've got all these fans in there who saw the band so many times, and there's tons of threads in this place. You can go back and search for any of the cities, and you'll find all these threads when people start showing all these photos that they took, and now I'm accumulating thousands of photos. And of course, it becomes obvious, just, yeah, this needs to become a book. And then I saw Geddy Lee's Big Book of Bass, and I saw that it was 12 by 12, and yes, this is what this needs to be. And it was really that simple. I had no idea the business mechanisms and how I was going to do this, but I just thought this needs to get done. And I will just make the thing, and I will sort out the rest of the things when they can be sorted out. And fortunately, there was a pandemic in my case, because they gave me a ton of time to work on this. Because as a touring musician, yeah, I could be in the back of the van and kind of keeping to myself and doing some work, but nothing's better for a writer than having a huge chunk of time to
Yeah.
work on a thing, and you just have to eat your meals and just focus as much as you want to focus, and then take your break when you want to break. And so I was very lucky to not be having to going on the road for so long. So that's basically how it happens. And in the end, I find a printer in England the first time around. The second edition has been printed in Canada. So, but had to figure how to do the thing with a customs broker to get them into the country, and there were all kinds of delightful complications. Did a book release, and the band members came, and a few hundred people came, and I also had found a whole bunch of Super 8 footage of Max Webster, and so I had a big screen, so it kind of doubled as a book launch slash film screening. And I had about 20 minutes of footage I showed, which was silent footage, but I synced audio to it by identifying all the clips, which helps if you're a musician, you can figure this
Yeah.
out. And to
Yeah.
have the band members in the room watching this old footage of themselves they'd never seen before, just, it was really cool. So I
Priceless.
kind
Yeah.
of started from nothing, and just bit by bit, these little ideas come to your mind, and just no one tells you can't do it. And I realized there's a niche there. And yeah, I sold 1,000 books. And so now we have a second edition. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I missed the first one, and I remember I was on your wait list for the second one.
Mm.
So of course we talked about this beforehand, but back I believe it was 2013 or 2014, Martin Popoff put out, I believe, the first Max Webster book, Live Magnetic Air. He since
Mm.
reissued it under a different name, and you had said that that really gave you the impetus to that you realize that, okay, if there's a mark, obviously there's a market out there for this band.
Yes. Well, first of all, I was absolutely gutted I couldn't go to that release party because I was on tour in LA. I missed it by 2 days. And I heard all about it, and it just, Dave Miles and Paul Kersey and Pi Dubois, and and some other people close to Max Webster came, and I just thought this is so great that band members were showing up. So this clearly was a significant event. For those who don't know, I mean, yeah, Dave Miles was the bass player, and Terry Walkinson keyboardist, Paul Kersey drummer, um, and and Pi Dubois, the lyricist. Rush
Yeah.
fans listening, Pi Dubois
Oh
wrote
yeah.
Battle Scar,
Yeah.
and that was, and then he ended up writing Tom Sawyer.
Tom Sawyer
So
at Force 10. What
that
was it?
was a
Between
big deal.
Sun and Moon and Test for Echo. I got to rattle all
Hesperec,
four off.
yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
know everything.
Well,
But all that came to be, as much as the Rush guys and Max guys were on the road for years. They did about a couple over 200 days together. But it wasn't until the Battle Scar session where you had the two bands in the same room. Jack Richardson was producing the album from Max Webster, like a conductor with a baton
conductor.
between the two bands,
Yeah.
just on two 24-track machines. Just this had never been done before, and it was a technical nightmare for the engineers. And David Green was one of the engineers or the engineer on it. He was the guy that did These Eyes by the Guess Who, and that's how he knows Jack Richardson. Just
Jack. Yeah.
incredible stories.
Yeah.
David, I interviewed him for 3 hours. He has incredible stories about being a New York guy in the 60s. But he was the guy that had to put that together, two 24-track machines. So there was a lot of downtime when they were working out the technical stuff, and then they could do their 10 takes of the song. But during some of the downtime, Pi Dubois is doing his thing. He's writing his words, and he would have these huge volumes. And Kim's genius was plucking through all of these books, novels of stuff, and just the little bits of words that he liked. And just, yep, I can make music for that. And so Pi was just sitting there writing something down. It was called Louis the Lawyer. And he shows it to Kim and he says, "Are you into this?" And Kim says, "Nope, but I think Neil will be." And then 3 months later, Rush have a new song on the road called Tom Sawyer. And
Yeah.
that was it. It's funny how people think Max Webster were piggybacking off of Rush. It's kind of the opposite. It's because
Yeah.
the Max Webster thing exists that Rush get into the keyboard phase of their career. It's from touring with Max Webster. Terry
Yeah.
Watkinson became Geddy Lee's keyboard mentor.
Yeah.
And that's where all this comes from. It's so fascinating because usually you think it happens the other way around, but no, it was Rush learning from them.
Yeah. I mean, I think there might be some uh, well, just to clarify, yes, Max Webster they were never a headliner above Rush. They were always opening for Rush when they
Yes.
were touring with them. And they did it, I think, on each of the five albums. At least part of that tour was opening for some Rush tour on whatever
Yes.
album they were on. And it wasn't even though they were all Anthem, even though they were managed by Ray Daniels and SRO and all that, it wasn't just because, well, you have to take these guys with you. No, Rush loved Max Webster. They thought they were incredible musicians. They really wanted to help break them,
Yeah.
on an international scale. And we're talking about a band that hadn't quite broken themselves, but
Yeah.
they insisted that no, this band we want to get this band out in front of people. Yeah, so not only there's so many connections. So yeah, Terry Watkinson tutoring Geddy on keyboards. You've got Paul Kersey who auditioned to replace John Rutsey, and then
Yes.
that's a strange story unto itself. So obviously, chops. We're talking about chops galore, and
Yeah.
the fact, and I just love this that on one of the later tours, Neil would sit at his drums behind Gary McCracken's kit under a curtain and
Yeah.
play Max Webster's set unmiked, except for one occasion, which I read that it was, but you couldn't tell because he was playing it so
Yeah.
precisely. So yeah, that's how much respect they had for these guys. But also you've got Terry Brown, you've got Hugh Syme, like there are so many connections there. But the
Yeah.
bottom line is that
Well,
Rush
yeah.
thought so much of these guys that they and just sadly for whatever reason, Max Webster remain, a well-loved cult favorite of a band in most of the world. In Canada, it's kind of a bigger deal, but one thing I've noticed that you mentioned that they were big in Ontario, which is of course their home province. Well, I grew up and I still live in New Brunswick, so I'm in the Maritimes, and I don't think Max Webster came this way very much at all. I mean, Kim
Yeah, maybe
certainly did, but
just a few gigs. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. There just wasn't as much of an infrastructure in Canada. There just wasn't really a Canadian music business until Jack Richardson. I
yeah,
mean, it's not insignificant. I mean, this is why Neil Young and Joni Mitchell they had to go to California
yeah,
to find a career of some kind. But Jack ends up bringing David Green, Jack Richardson, because the Guess Who thing, bring them
yeah,
into Toronto, and they started building studios in the Yorkville area, just kind of Young and Bloor, on just north of Young and Bloor. They basically before then just no one really recorded in Toronto except for Toronto bands. And then suddenly you got Alice Cooper
yeah,
recording Welcome to My Nightmare, Elton records Blue Moves, and just
yeah,
you got action. The
yeah,
Peter Gabriel's first album, and
yeah,
Robert Fripp is in town, and that's why he goes and sees Max Webster at a gig on Toronto Island because I'm sure Ezrin told him just go and check this out, this
yeah.
Canadian band. So but before that, you don't really have much of a Canadian music business. It's not till the 80s that it kind of really, really congeals and comes together. But it was hard to even break an Ontario band in the rest of Canada.
Yeah,
So
yeah, which is
it's a
weird to think
slow,
about, but it's
yeah,
true. I mean, and then of course in Quebec, Le Studio, when that started,
yeah,
that got the Police and like
yeah,
huge groups recorded there.
yeah,
But yeah, it really was early days, and yeah, I mean that story about when the drinking age lowered, that factors heavily into Rush's career. I think these guys were about the same age too,
yeah,
so it really made a difference of the places that they could play. But yeah, it's crazy when you read all these tour dates how the contrast between them doing all of these bar gigs and all of a sudden they're opening for a big band in a huge venue. And when you listen to those recordings, you can't really tell the difference. They played so well no
Yeah.
matter how many people were there. But and what amazes me, Bob, is that it's amazing that we have all of these early live recordings of and studio recordings, and they're quite good. Like they're not poor quality, a tape recorder under a chair. They're very listenable. And you
Yeah.
mentioned Paul Kersey, how important he was to, the early days of the band. And it was, yes, he only actually played on the first album, but man, a lot of the songs that ended up on the next few albums, he still played on because they would do some of those songs in the clubs. You mentioned Battlescar, but a lot of the songs that ended up on later albums he was doing way back then. And there's even more
Yeah.
songs that never ended up on one of their albums that they did for years and years on end. It's
Well,
crazy
they
how
had
prolific
tons
they
of
were.
songs. It's in their official promo stuff around the first album. Kim says there's we have 50 originals, and that's definitely not an exaggeration because we've got nearly 50 Max songs that exist on all these different live recordings, and and a lot of them are quite good. The ones that didn't end up on the albums, but you understand why they didn't. I mean, they always pick the strongest stuff, as any band does.
Yeah,
I mean, typically you've got good quality control. I mean, Terry Brown's producing their albums, so
yeah,
that's the other Rush connection there, and he's excellent at what he does for those records because you hear those the live versions of the songs, but then when they record them, they become tighter.
yeah,
And that, is that the band in the studio? Is that the producer? A bit of both, whatever it is. But those songs get to exactly where they need to get. And yeah, Paul Kersey's playing on over half the Max catalog for sure. I mean,
yeah,
between 74 and 76, most of that catalog is written, and they could just have songs that were holdovers onto the next records. So, so yeah, a lot of beauty up my sleeve. The third album is stuff that they were playing in the bars, going back to pretty much the beginning. And because they were changing bass players and it was a bit of a rough time internally in the band. So they kind of went backwards and refurbished, polished some songs they had. And that's Lip Service, that's Beyond the Moon. Those are songs
yeah.
they had for years at that point, and they were very different songs when they were playing them live. So it's really cool that we can see this whole kind of process now of how these things were put together. It really is like learning how the pyramids were built. Because if you know this band, you know that just what a monumental track Beyond the Moon is,
Yeah,
and then you learn that guitar solo at the end. That's kind of Kim Mitchell's Hamlet soliloquy guitar solo moment.
yeah,
That's not on the original song. That was composed later, probably after Hotel California came out. This idea of playing a similar line and going down a key and going down a key, that's what's going on in that solo. It's a far more complicated version because he's doing this kind of 5/4 thing. It's this incredible part that he
yeah.
still to this day finishes with that solo at his shows. Kim is still a great guitar player, my
Oh
God.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
but that's where that comes out of it. That was in a song called Research at Beach Resorts, which later ends up on A Million Vacations. But that solo was in the middle of that song, and then it ends up in Beyond the Moon. So it's just a fascinating just way of making music where you kind of borrow from yourself
yeah.
and you realize, oh, this thing actually belongs here and this thing belongs here. And just that's a combination of the band and producer for sure.
I think that one of the advantages of not putting everything out that you write is that, yes, on one hand, there's some cool songs that, boy, it would have been nice to have a fully produced version of that. But it's kind of like Van Halen. I
Mm,
compare it to Van Halen because they wrote a ton of songs that ended up on, not only the first six albums, but that the reunion album they did with Roth. So
mm.
very prolific, and you can hear where they borrowed bits of songs. But what amazes me is the quality of these recordings because like were they soundboards? Because I mean, it's not like there's sometimes you get a bootleg and it's so badly recorded that even if you know the song, you can hardly tell what they're playing because it's muffled and you can't hear the
Sure.
vocals. These are songs that in a lot of cases people had never heard unless they were at the shows, but they're very listenable. Like would you say, how many albums worth, let's say the average length of a Max album, how many albums worth unreleased material would you say there would exist if if the band took it upon themselves to let's clean up these recordings and let's put them out? You think
Well,
there'd be
that's a tough question to answer because yeah, I'm sure there's maybe two or three albums worth, but it doesn't mean that all the songs are good enough for release. See,
right?
because Max were a bar band and they didn't want to play covers, so they would rather play mediocre originals than play good covers. And that made them different from most bands back then, plus the humor thing and the attire thing and the whole
Yeah,
presentation thing that they had. So it was this full package that they were right from the very beginning. But of truly releasable songs, well, because that doesn't mean necessarily they were recorded 24 track in the studio.
right.
So just the fact that they might have demoed them or just played them live doesn't mean that they're releasable. And so truly, um, maybe one album's worth, if that. I mean, all we really know is they had there's one song or two songs that were on the box set they did about a decade ago. And yeah, we know they recorded a song called Don't Be a Moon, Be a Star. They
Yeah,
recorded one called X and Y and the box set song. So maybe one album side, because it's hard to know because what you and I might think is releasable and what the artist might think is releasable is a whole other thing.
yeah,
Because his songs tend to be rejected for a reason. And if you have good quality control, most of the great bands, just the songs were cut for a reason. But when you're a fan of the band, of course, you just want to hear everything. But also as
yeah,
a musician, I understand there's a curiosity thing that fans of musicians have. But for example, if you're Bob Dylan, sometimes you don't have good quality control. And there were times when the best song didn't end up on the album. But if you're the Beatles, just there's no Beatles outtake that exists that of anything that wasn't properly worked on. And Rush, all these bands, just Beatles outtakes can be interesting to hear the process, but the final version is the final version.
yeah,
And they put out the best thing they could. Most artists, I'd imagine, were like that. Pink Floyd, it's cool to hear the new Wish You Were Here box set. You can hear the construction of these songs. And but the bottom line is the album is the album. And even when in back to Max Webster, when the Diamonds compilation came out right after the breakup,
right.
there
Yep.
were two new songs,
Yeah.
which for decades no one knew where they came from. But that's Paul Kersey. That's the first album sessions. And at that time, this is just what 6 years after they record that album, and Kim was horrified. His
Yeah.
mind already at that point was, well, they weren't good enough for the first album then. So what makes them good enough now? So that's probably only compounded now, and just the artist probably wouldn't want that kind of thing to come out. But some artists mellow out maybe, and they're happy to let that kind of stuff out. So that's a really hard question to answer because I'm not the one compiling it. But if I was, yeah, maybe they could do some other kind of archival release and release the albums, then have a couple of bonus tracks, and maybe they want to put that stuff out. But I heard the studio version of X and Y. It's not as good as the live version. That's why they didn't put it on the album. It really
Yeah.
worked well live. There's these great live tapes, but it's very kind of static in the studio. It just didn't work.
I think the reason that people obsess over stuff like this is because there is a finite amount of recordings, and if people just love this band, it's you just if there'd only been one more, like
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, it looked at one point in '81 like Max Webster was sort of reborn, reinvented. There was a new lineup, and
yeah.
then that obviously didn't happen. But there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of fantastic live footage from that time, and it just makes you wonder, like, what might have been with a a sixth studio album.
Oh, I know. And they were starting to write it when they were doing that last tour with Rush before Kim pulled the plug. They were in dressing rooms and kind of starting to write a little bit. And who knows what would come from that. But yeah, the intention was for it to be kind of a democratic thing, more like A Million Vacations was, where you had the different guys writing songs, and to make it more of a band thing and less of a Kim thing, because Kim was actually uncomfortable with the whole being pushed out to the front and just being him on the front of the album cover. The artist rarely calls the shots with these things.
Yeah,
You watch the Hypnosis documentary, and you just see that these things, these album covers were made for Zeppelin and Floyd, and the rejects went to Paul McCartney and Wings and stuff like that. And
right.
the
Yeah,
artist wasn't called, even Paul McCartney wasn't calling the shots with this stuff. It's just artwork. It's labels. It's business. And Kim was extremely uncomfortable with that stuff. So he wanted the next Max album to be very democratic. So, but that's just the way these things go. But yeah, they were starting to write. They had, yeah, I mean, sometimes bands demo songs and you think that they might come out later or they might just let them slide by because they're writing other stuff. It's just so hard because artists, they want to feel current and they don't want to feel like they're a fossilized version of themselves and that they have to dig into their archive of stuff. But sometimes they work on something for a long time and they can't quite figure it out. It's so hard to put a to just to pin down exactly where someone's head is at the time. And the more time that passes, they're kind of removed from that version of themselves. And so just going back to the whole, would they be able to release these old songs? Just they're completely different people now. It's 45 years later. Just who knows if they even care. But as
Yeah.
fans, if you stop thinking professionally, as a fan, yeah, your favorite bands, of course, you want to hear whatever you can from your favorite bands. So
Yeah.
it's a tricky little middle ground there that I'm kind of starting on both of these sides.
Yeah, no, I can understand why they're like, oh, that was such a long time ago. And they're too close to it to have somebody go, that's actually pretty good. It's not like we're trying to put it out and pass it off as a new album. If we tell people, look, this is archival stuff. If you want a
Mm,
sort of second look in on behind the curtain of the early days of Max Webster, well, here are a few songs, and maybe here's a few better known songs live or some sort of
yeah.
package like that. I know as a Rush fan, I was floored when the Rush 50 came out and they actually put out You Can't Fight It and Not Fade Away. I didn't think we'd ever see digitized versions of those because the band was so against putting such early, sort of bar bandish recordings. But to me, those sound every bit as good as anything on that first record. But I'm listening as a fan. I'm
Mm,
not, and I know it's the same thing with like Hot Spots and Overnight Sensation. Um, Record labels want bait to get people to buy an album of mostly stuff they've already purchased.
yeah.
So you put a couple unreleased songs, or maybe a couple newly written songs in this case, and or you do what Anthem did and not really make it clear what those were. Just two
Yeah.
songs that you didn't, I don't know these titles. Um,
Yeah.
but they
I
were
know.
probably easiest to put out because they were actually recorded.
Well, exactly. But then on the flip side of that, Elton put out a box set a few years ago of all kinds of stuff from the late 60s. And there were just 50 completely unheard of, very early songs. And you go to the reviews on superdeluxeedition.com, and it's just wall to wall people saying, I don't know these songs. It's just, isn't this a wet dream for an Elton fan to hear
Yeah,
this stuff? But just people are weird, man. Pink
I know.
Floyd put
You
out,
know,
that's 27 disc box set, the early years, 67 to 72. It's incredible. And there's a number of complaints. Oh, but it wasn't 28 discs. It's just, oh God. Just you cannot please some people.
it's yeah. Well, look at all the stuff that came out after Prince died.
Uh,
All of these alternate takes and just him and the piano and him doing songs that other people recorded. And so
yes.
the stuff is there. I mean, you know, Neil Young, he's got albums and albums and albums worth of stuff that nobody's
Yeah.
ever heard, I would imagine. So,
Oh
but when a
yeah. Well,
case like
Springsteen
Max,
did
where
too.
Springsteen's been pretty good at curating that.
Yeah.
That's what Max, I think somebody in the Max Webster camp or associated should be trying to curate that. But I know that these guys are, they're like, I guess, they're even Kim. I mean, he seems kind of, it's cool that people care, but you're not really sure how much he cares, right? I know he likes some of the material because, like, I never got to see Max live. I've seen Kim a couple of times, and the first time I saw him, he did On the Road, and the second time I saw him, they did High Class and Borrowed Shoes. So he's still playing those songs, like you said.
Oh yeah. Yes, he's still, yeah, he just played a gig on the weekend. He came out of the gig with Here Among the Cats and Drive and Desire. Yeah, he always
Cool.
plays a few Max songs now, which is really great.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's pretty wonderful because artists have such a such a connection to their past that only they can understand. And it sounds so obvious when you say it, but when you have lived it, it's it's just artist to artist. These things are so different, and they go through different periods of what they want to do and what parts of their past they want to acknowledge and what they don't want to acknowledge. There was a period when Billy Corgan did not want to acknowledge that he was in the Smashing Pumpkins and formed a new band that did not play a single one of those songs. And
Yeah.
when Van Halen, after Sammy Hagar becomes the singer, just in that period, they barely acknowledged David Lee Roth.
Right. Yep.
And it's just the way it goes. But even when bands have the same lineup, they go through phases of let's just kind of play our newer stuff and not play our older stuff. I'm a huge Queen guy. When they
Hmm.
toured Hot Space, they completely pretty much ignored their early material. And the majority of their show was the game in Hot Space. And if you like the
Yeah.
early Queen albums, yeah, this tour was not for you. But it also got amazing reviews because reviewers saw it as okay, they're trimming the fat and they're playing the stuff that's popular. They have this fabulous light show. That was the best reviews they ever got, was when they toured for their worst album. It's
Yeah,
nuts.
that's
So
that. No,
it's
it's
actually crazy.
where an artist is at and where their approval rating with the public is at often aren't the same at the same time.
I know. And they don't want to be overthinking what they're doing. They're just in the present. They're doing what they're doing. They're doing what they think matters to them in that moment. And just Bowie, just the Sound and Vision tour. Yes, I'll play my hits, but after this, I'm not really going to do this stuff anymore. And you look at his set list in the '90s, and just yeah, he we have one hit in his whole show, and that's so cool. I think that's so great that he did what he wants to do. I saw Jeff Beck in 2018, and yeah, he played one thing that might be considered a hit, and that was it. And why? Because the
Yeah.
the artist wants to do what they want to do, and I think that's so great that you have
Yeah.
this variety of what people want to do, and and as much as people, the biographers, I guess that this is us speaking our language now. You kind of want to get in the heads of the people who make this music when you're writing about them. And I mean, are you a musician yourself?
I've never been a professional musician. I play a little guitar. I used to play drums, so
Yeah, but no, but you're a musician. That's the point.
yeah.
If you play an instrument, you're writing books. I mean, it's. I think it's so beneficial that you can have your own connection with music when you're writing about musicians. I mean, do you want to read a cookbook written by someone who's not a chef? It's
Right.
You know what I mean? It's so
Yeah.
important. But then on the flip side, but art is kind of this unique thing. Sometimes it can be really interesting when you have people who aren't artists and they see art in a way that artists don't see it. So there's kind of room for both of these things too, because art's for everyone in the same way that food's for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. So
Compare.
so just coming back to the book thing, this is kind of what I tried to bring to writing a book about a band is you doing the history side of it, which can be a little bit kind of not cold, but just here's what happened this day, here's what happened this day. But I tried to be insightful about it and try to get into the minds of the artists and try to put it in the context of what's happening at the time, because this band is not this monolith that exists on its own. It still exists in a culture around other music, around other art, around events, around people. And these people are going through what they're going through in their own lives. All these things make the art that they make. And when you start talking to people in a band and the people around a band, then you start seeing the whole picture. And that's kind of to bring it back to what you originally asked. Why did you do this book? Well, that's why. And as a musician myself, that just became so natural that that's what I wanted to put together about this band, and that it really needed to get done. And because every great band needs to have some kind of work that feels like it's complete. And hey, if somebody wants to write a better one, please, I would love to read that book. So, but it's so important that every artist that's important to people has some kind of work like this. And here it is. And if somebody discovers this artist, here it is. And now you can know
Yep.
about it.
I couldn't agree more, Bob. Like, I mean, it's one of the gratifying things that I hear when people say, it's great when they say, "Hey, yeah, I bought your book." Great. But it's even better when they say, "I bought your book and I ordered a couple of CDs by whoever the book was about." Or I didn't realize they had this many albums. I just ordered a bunch of them. In the case of your comparison to how a musician sees things as to how a fan would see things, it kind of reminds me of, you were saying how like an artist sees things, and how a non-artist would see the same type of thing. It's kind of a comparison, but the panel books that I've done, sometimes you get people who have been into a band from the get-go or from the first time the first single came out, or maybe they knew them in the bars, and then you get someone, a younger person that's been listening to them for 5 years. All those opinions are just as valid, and sometimes a newer fan will pick up on something like, did you ever notice that this kind of sounds like this? And you're like,
Mm,
not in 40 years did I notice that, but I'll always notice it now. So there's
yeah.
always, you can always, I've learned something about every artist I've done books on. And I agree with you. I think every classic band needs some sort of, not monument, but something where somebody can go, I want to read about. And yes, the internet's got all this information, but there's something about having a book that you can pick up with you anywhere. And everything's all in one place, and it gives you an idea of here are the records, here are the songs. What do you think? Now, when you
Yeah.
were putting the book together, was there anything, I mean, as a longtime fan of Max, was there anything that really surprised you in your research, something that you had no idea about?
Oh, tons. I mean, all that early stuff. I had no idea how far back the band even begins.
Yeah,
Just, yeah, I think I said earlier that you know the first album happens in 1976, but that period, those 3 years before that, it was absolutely mind blowing to discover just how far back some of these songs went and how different they were, and just to learn that just how fluid this creative process was. That stuff absolutely blew my mind for sure. Yeah, just listening to stuff like Battlescar, Beyond the Moon, and Research at Beach Resorts and Lip Service and Blue River Liquorshine. That was a very different song when
yeah,
that one done by the first album lineup and doesn't end up coming out until after it's the last, on the last album.
yeah,
So yeah, just that stuff was so interesting, and just hearing how the band evolved because of course you change the drummer, change the bass player, and just the sound of the band of course changes. It's kind of like Zappa or the Eagles, or yes, just each album past one or two albums, the
yeah.
band kind of morphs into a
So,
slightly different animal.
yeah,
And Max Webster's kind of the same way. And it's not better or worse, it's just different.
just different.
And
Yeah,
and these songs take different shape with the different people that are in the band. And I love hearing the differences. But more generally, I think just if you really look objectively at those tour itineraries and you see the number of hours that Max Webster logged in that van, that touring schedule would have killed most lesser people.
yeah,
It just there's I mean Cochrane to St. Catharines one night, and a roadie's doing the driving, and the recording of the St. Catharines gig backing Rush in 1975, and just perfect. That band's been on the road for whatever. How long is that drive? 12 hours, 14 hours, and they just load in, sound check, and they play perfectly. And
yeah.
then the next night they drive to whatever they go, Guelph, I think, and they just the hours in that van. These are not very simple tour stops on a private jet. Just there's a huge drives that are
That's
happening.
that's the
It's
thing about
insane.
that's the thing about Canada. Like it's a smaller country, but the cities can be so far apart. But what else do you do? You've got
Well,
to
that's what
you
it
you
was.
can't keep playing the same play. You're going to go to the well too many times. So you've got to get out there.
Exactly. I know. And by the time they get to a certain point, it's just okay, now we're a theater band and doing arenas and stuff. So yeah, we can't oversaturate the market. And so but I guess discovering how people perceived that band was a big thing for me because as far as I knew, just yeah, it's a band that just ended decades earlier. But to hear firsthand from people who told me just it was nuts that this was a bar band. You could just walk in and see them for free, 6 nights a week at pretty much any bar in the city. And then we just saw them as a theater band and we're happy to pay $5 to go and see them at the New Yorker and then Massey Hall. And just that's absolutely nuts that this was a thing that people that is how effective this band was at what they did, is that people saw this band 5-10 times in the bars, and they would still happily pay to see them in a theater.
Yeah.
Just that doesn't often happen.
No, that's yeah. And when you look at all those tour dates, you kind of have to think, well, no wonder they were so good. No wonder they were so tight. They just kept doing it.
And when they weren't gigging, they were rehearsing. There's
Yeah.
a great story in the book somewhere. Mike Chilcom says, bass player, he says we would be on some kind of a festival gig or multi-band gig, whatever it was, and we'd be rehearsing our vocals in the back corner. We had, they had some, he just says, we had a large dressing room and there are three bands dressing up, and we'd be in the corner running our vocals, and the other bands would laugh at us. And it's just, yeah, no, we're running our vocals. And just you listen to those recordings, they're spotless.
Yeah.
And their tempos, Kim was so, just when Gary McCracken comes in that band, just just it kind of tightens up the band, and the vocals are so tight. But they're always tight. At the very beginning of that band, they were
Yeah.
always tight. But for sure, the band tightens up a little bit more when Gary comes into the band, because Kersey had this kind of spontaneous flair. It was really cool and exciting. But that's the direction the band, that's what they go into, and everything tightens up even more. And just, yeah, they're getting laughed at for writing their vocals, but listen to the recordings. You can't argue with the
Yeah.
results. It's an
I
incredible band.
I love reading about I think it was Tilka. I'm pretty sure it was Tilka talking about he couldn't sing. It was Gravity, and singing the chorus, he would sing like the lower part, and Kim would sing the harmony live.
Yeah.
Well, I would never have picked that up, but that's just the little level of I couldn't do it as good as I thought I could, so we changed it up.
Yeah, it's true. And but that's just the way it happened to work. I mean, these guys knew each other's voices so well, and the ground that they could cover. And yeah, Tilka was a great backing vocalist.
Yeah,
And those harmonies, they're incredible to
yeah,
listen to. Yeah, they're just, yeah, we've all heard the studio version of Diamonds Diamonds, but that kind of block vocal thing was all over their early originals,
yeah,
and just an incredibly good band. And I
yeah,
mean, Cherry's not in the band at the beginning, so it's by about 1974 that starts happening, where they start realizing, just, yeah, these three voices, they gel really well together. And so you listen to that early version of Blue River Licorice Shine, and they're just block harmonies, the three of them. They're
yeah.
just perfectly spotless every time.
Yeah, and I, the one thing about trying to impress upon like potential new fans is like, yes, the album covers are goofy looking. They're a very strange looking band, but it's not novelty, it's not comedy. You don't get to be that good if you're just having a laugh with it. So I would hope
Yes.
people would listen for the music and like, oh yeah, well they dressed outrageously, but when you think about it, so did Queen, right? It
Yeah.
just wasn't always on the album covers. Like, High Class and Borrowed Shoes is I always think about what a fantastic album that is. And yet in 1977, if I was a teenager walking into Sam the Record Man, I'm not so sure that would have leapt off the shelf at me. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
100%. And then when they played Massey Hall a month later, just that's what they wore. It's amazing to look at the photos. I have a
Yeah.
couple of them in the book. But that's right. It's funny. We've been kind of doing the niche dorky side of this. If we're speaking on this show to the uninitiated, just, yeah, the High Class and Burrow Shoes album, just start there. And
Yeah.
just those 9 songs, just, if this doesn't just interest you in some way, it has to, though. If you're interested in music, whether or not you like it, that's one thing, but you can't be indifferent to this. When you
No.
listen to these
It
songs, you listen
dem-
to "Oh War" and "In
yeah.
Context of the Moon" and "Gravity" and "On the Road," you listen to these songs, just, you can't shrug your shoulders in indifference hearing these, because there's nothing that sounds like this music. But if you're into Rush, if you're into, God, I mean, if you're into Queen, into Yes, into Genesis, if you enjoy the slightly left of center, kind of off the wall, quirky, adjacent stuff, then yeah, this is a great band. And I've met people who are, especially younger people, who are just disappointed and almost angry when they discover, just how was this band kept from me for so long? Once they
Yeah.
hear it, and
That's
it's
right.
just, how did I not know this existed?
And like I said, I think we all have bands like this in our musical lives. And for me, it's Y&T. I always say all people need to do is hear them. If you like dot 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 dot, then there's no real good reason why you wouldn't like. And Max
Yeah,
Webster, like, really, I think all of their albums sound really good, but either high class or Diamonds, or not Diamonds, Diamonds, sorry, A Million Vacations.
yeah,
Um, those are good sounding albums, but High Class
yeah.
and Borrowed Shoes is just for 1977. Man, what a high fidelity recording that is! Like, and everything is
Yeah.
in its place, just where it needs to be. There's plenty of bass, lots of guitar. Like Kim is such a self-effacing character. At least that's how he comes off. I've met him very, very briefly, just in passing, but I don't think he gets enough credit as a guitar player. Definitely not as a guitar player or as a vocalist. Sometimes the best thing you could be as a vocalist is distinctive. And when you hear a Kim Mitchell song you've never heard before, well, that's Kim Mitchell. You know?
Yeah, I know. It's just he is like that, and yeah, he still jokes to this day at his gigs because he plays with Peter Fredette. He's still an incredible singer, Peter
Yeah,
Fredette, and he says, "Yeah, Peter sings and I yell." It's just please. Kim won Juno for Vocalist of the Year for his Rockland Wonderland album. You listen
yeah.
to Expedition Sailor and tell me he's not an incredibly good singer.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
it's nuts that people just kind of sometimes reduced him. But that's the music videos. That was the business. He became the perennial summer concert goofball guy.
That's right. He
But
had
but he's a
the
genius musician.
OPP hat and the long straight hair and the guitar slung really
Yeah,
high, and he was a
yeah,
likable, he was a likable kind of character. But I mean, listen to songs like Lost Lovers Found or Atlanta Loves Me or Hitting the Ground. I mean, there's some great.
yeah,
He's got a nice lower mid-range kind of voice, and he writes songs within that range. And yes, he's
yeah,
got Peter Fredette in his back pocket to do the high parts. It's a great
yes,
arrangement. I mean, listen, all
yeah.
anyone has to do is listen to All We Are.
Ugh,
It's a great
yeah,
combination of the high and low voices. They work really, really well
exactly.
together. And
Well,
Max was the same thing. I
yeah,
mean, Terry was a great singer on his own. Terry could have been a lead singer in a band if things had gone differently. He was that good. He wasn't just,
yeah,
we'll let this guy sing once in a while. No, he was like Roger Taylor. He was a singer
yes.
on his own right.
Yeah, great comparison. In fact, in the forward of my book, it's Ron Sexsmith does the
Right.
forward,
Yep.
and he's the Paul Simon of Canada. So most people wouldn't think that he's a big rock guy, but yeah, he loves Max Webster, one of his favorite bands, and he likens the Terry Watkinson songs to the George Harrison songs in the
Yep.
Beatles catalog, and that's completely accurate.
Yep.
And I don't listen to those songs the same way now after I've heard him say that because yeah, it because when you're so close to a subject, you lose objectivity about it after so long when you're writing in such a niche way about it. But then you just kind of take a step back and then I just went and listened to the albums one day because somebody commissioned me to do a review of all 5 albums. And I listened to them in one shot on a train ride and just listened to those 50-ish songs and in order. Never done it before, and maybe might never do it again, but I did it once. And the Terry Watkinson songs, they smooth some of those edges, and it helps make the entire thing flow. And there's so few bands that work like this. And the Million Vacations album, I think, is the strongest in that way.
I was just going to say the song that come to
Harmonium,
mind, Charmonium. Yeah, that's
get out.
fantastic.
How
Yeah.
incredible of a song that is.
Yeah.
And Night Flights and
Yeah.
Let Go of the Line. That's three of their 10 best songs. And Terry's written 3 of them on the same album.
Yeah.
They're incredibly good songs. So yeah, it wasn't, Kim and his band. It was a band.
Yeah.
It's so crucially important. And
That's what
Gary
yeah.
McCracken sings on A Million Vacations.
Yeah.
And most people don't even know what his name is, but they
He
love the
does,
song.
he does a fine job on that song. I
Yeah,
mean, and there's humor. Let's not, there is humor in the songs for sure. You don't listen to a song like Rascal Hootie and not get a smile on your face. I mean, it's like, wow,
sure.
that is so out there, but it's so good. Or even The Party. I mean, The Party is like, the ultimate party song, and yet it's like the proggiest party song I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's riffs in that song that could have been their own song in their
Yeah.
own right. I mean, the ending just could have
Yeah.
been a song. Even that last riff,
Yeah.
that
Down, 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 down. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that thing that could have been a song.
They
But
could
that's
have
just
gone. That was,
it's just so great. Yeah. So just going back to Kim, yeah, Kim is an unadulterated genius. I mean, for the lyric mentioned, the lyric thing I mentioned, just him being able to go through Pi Dubois' books and just pluck up these little bits and put music to them. He's a genius for that alone. But then you just look at the way he plays the guitar. He's a jazz guy first.
yeah.
Most people don't realize that about him. He took jazz lessons for a year when he was about 20. And just he's so outside the box. He's such an interesting guitar player. And he doesn't approach it the way most rock guys do. He's very imaginative in a way that Frank Zappa was, but he's not in Zappa's brain. Zappa's not in his brain. They're two completely different players, but the approach is the same, where you decorate a piece of time and you don't really have a box of licks that you pull from the way most rock players do. Of course, there's parts of songs that are iconic parts of songs that are in solos, but when you watch Kim play a lead, he's playing his song Rock and Roll Duty or whatever. He never plays that the same way twice. He's such a creative player. He does not play in a box. He just invents lines that are different every night.
Yeah.
So if you just look at his set list, yeah, fine, he's playing the same 12 songs, but or 15 songs, whatever it is, but he doesn't play these songs the same way twice. And that's when you just realize that's why he doesn't need to, because within those songs are still evolving. And you watch the way he plays some of those songs, and just, yeah, he still is reinventing those songs because he's such an original, just so originally minded to how he approaches his songs, because he doesn't orchestrate parts like that. He's imaginative, and most rock guys are not like that. He's a jazz guy. It's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it's almost, and in some ways, not only with Max, but also his solo career. I don't know, maybe the music was just a little bit too smart for, the great mass, the massive world out there.
Yep.
Particularly, like even Go for a Soda. I mean, that's the one song anybody that I've talked to from the States, you go, Kim Mitchell. Oh yeah, Go for a Soda. Um, there's a lot of smart parts in that song. Like there's a lot of really, it's not your average arrangement for a rock song, and it's super catchy, but even try and play that opening lick. I don't know what the heck
Yes.
he's doing.
Nobody can.
Yeah.
Nobody can. The only person on this planet that can properly play that lick is Kim.
Yeah.
I have seen so many guys come close. I've been playing professionally since for over 20 years, 25 years, whatever it is. And just, I cannot play that lick. There's just a certain touch that he
Yeah.
has when he plays that lick. And, and isn't that great? Isn't that special that just there's one person that can do
Yeah.
something? It's so
It's like
singular.
it's like Mark Knopfler. I've never seen anybody play Money for Nothing right except him.
Yeah, yeah. Is it just that, and just that Kim should be in these conversations.
That's
That lick
right.
in Go for a Soda is as singularly interesting and unique as that lick from Money for Nothing. 100%
Yeah.
accurate.
And it should be
And
as well known. Like out, I mean, in Canada, I would say it is.
oh, of course, it's a massive song. I mean, he
Yeah.
still plays. Friends of mine went and saw him in Peterborough last summer, and it was an outdoor festival for 15, 20,000 people. And they've seen him with me a couple times, but I wasn't there. And she wrote to me and said, just there were 15,000 people singing these songs. And I said,
Yeah.
yeah, they're hymns. She says, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Just it's really special. And she said
Yeah.
it sounded perfect and everything. They're kind of halfway back in this giant sea of people. And it was just, the Peterborough choir singing these hymns of Kim
Yeah.
Mitchell.
Yeah.
And just people get it.
Yeah. So folks, uh once again, I'm gonna put something that no, this is, I mean, you have to put some time into this, but it is so worth it. Everything you could ever want to know about this band, Max Webster, high class. Where's the easiest place for people to get this, Bob?
It's it's in not many places. Primarily it's on the website, highclassmax.com. So yeah, throw that in your description or whatever
I'll
you
put
like.
that below. Yep.
That's where you find it online. If you're in Toronto, you can find you can find it at Circus Books and Music at Danforth and Jones. It's at Cops Records in Oshawa, right next to the Regent Theatre, on consignment in both those places. They're available. But apart from that, it's on the website, highclassmax.com, and they're printed in Canada, and it'll be shipped out of Winnipeg.
And you'll get a great big box in the mail, and you go, "What is that?" Oh yeah, right.
Yes,
uh,
indeed. But it's a
so
trip. If you're in the uninitiated, yeah, listen to the 5 albums and enjoy them. And if you enjoy the music, then you'll definitely enjoy the deep dive through this book, because it's not just about the band. It's about Canadian music history.
yeah,
And to me, half the book is in the footnotes. And there's so much other stuff going on there, because I just didn't kind of want to write about one band. So it's really cool in that sense too, and that there's kind of a subplot that's kind of happening. And there's a couple little dad jokes in the footnotes too, if you read it carefully. And I just didn't want to be too serious the whole way through. There's also a quiz in within the book as well. There's the collage of photos, and you have to spot the photos throughout the book, and the answers on the back page. So it's just kind of it's a part scavenger hunt, part travelogue, part encyclopedic, just a kind of a fully immersive experience into this band. And if you know the band, of course, just buy the book. What are you waiting for? But if you're new to the band, then yeah, it's a great way to get to know the band and Canadian music history as a whole, because they touch on a lot of different things in it.
And the photos are amazing, and you get to see the ever-changing hat styles and clothing styles of most, Kim, and the whole band, but also the different guitars that he would have used over the years. And if you're
Yes.
if you're a gearhead, you'll love seeing stuff like that. The detail of, here's what size
Mm.
hi-hat that, all of that stuff too. So Bob, I
Yeah,
wanted to talk to you a little
100%.
bit about you as a musician, because
Yeah, sure.
I know that you, for many many years, played with classic albums live.
Yeah.
And I've talked about many a classic albums live show that I've seen in my area, usually in Fredericton. And so, for those that don't know, Classic Albums Live is a troupe, we'll say, that plays, just like it says, a classic album in its entirety, start to finish, as it was recorded. If a song fades out, they fade it out on stage, intermission, and they come back out and do a set of songs from that artist that aren't on the album. Very, very enjoyable. They don't try and look like whoever it is. It's just really great. It's like a perfectly executed recital of an album.
Yeah.
And I've seen you at least once, and that would have been about, yeah, we're almost talking about 9 years ago now, uh, doing 2112 as part of Classic Albums
Mhm.
Live. Um, how was that, learning that album? I mean, I'm sure that you'd played it, but how was it learning it to like play it precisely right?
Well, I like that you separated those two halves of the question, because yeah, you cannot be a jobber and then get into classic albums live and do that. You can't just learn an album like this. The nuances in an album is from a lifetime of listening to that music with love. And you have to know the music, and you can't get pickup players in that. And so yeah, there are people with, better chops and all that, but they won't be in that, because just you have to understand so many of the little nuances, and just the little pinch harmonics, just the tiniest little things that are in there. Just you have to know these songs inside out. So yeah, when we did the album, there's of course songs that Rush never played live too. So we had to put a bit of extra attention on doing the second side of 2112. Songs like Lessons and Tears,
Lessons, yeah,
and all that, and Twilight Zone. They played that live maybe two or three times,
right.
but basically it wasn't part of their normal repertoire. So we had to put extra loving care into those songs, because the only template we had for those was the album version.
There
So
were
we just
no there were no
super
live
careful.
versions you could
Yeah,
easily
there was
reference. Like,
two
well,
recordings of
yeah,
Twilight Zone, but of course it's very different because there was four guys. See, when we did that, if there were two guitars, then I was playing with Des Leahy. Just he and I would double apart, and if the vocal was double tracked, both the singers would sing the part. Just
yeah.
it was and very accurate, like the classical recital. That's a great way of putting it.
Oh, I
And
like I
so
remember before, the overture starts, but I remember just before Temples of Syrinx kicks in. It's one thing to listen to the stuff over the years, but I realized that, holy cow, they actually have to go up there and sing the way that Getty sang in 1976, as high as it was. And yes, I really appreciated the fact that, yeah, that's a double tracked vocal when he's, in character as the priests. And then when he's the
yes,
guy that finds the guitar, he's very meek and is just one guy. But yeah,
yes,
the attention to detail is everything. You cannot improvise. That's why probably a lot of better players, or, really good players, would be like, that's not right. You've got to play it
yes.
like the album, and you got to do it consistently.
Well, the one part where we did have an ending that wasn't a fade out was Something for Nothing, because it's the end of the album. So we did kind of do it like the fade out, and then it would go on for another 20 seconds, whatever, and then we just had an ending and we got out of that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, what went with Lessons though, yeah, just volume pedals, crank back, and just like the album, that's how we did it. And it was spotless. And but the second half of the show, Yeah, how immodest of me. It was spotless, but we worked so hard. We were at intermission just before the gig, after sound check, just we would just be running things to make them even closer. We would
Yeah.
listen, we would record it and listen back to it, and just a little. So every night it got better, and we did about 20 days, and it just got stronger and stronger and stronger as that tour wore on. And we added a couple songs to the second half of the show. We added, I think, Bastille Day
You
and
definitely added
Limelight.
Bastille Day. Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Limelight, and that came in maybe later. I can't remember. But we did that a half a dozen times or so, and but we just ran it at sound check, and we wouldn't do it until it was ready, and just we had to just be so careful with these arrangements because these songs, those are also like hymns to people. And we, of course, if you're, you can, people can play decent versions, but we didn't want to play decent. We wanted to play an accurate version
Yeah.
of these songs. And of course, we're human. We make mistakes. And yeah, I remember one night messing up the beginning of Just an Early Morning, but we're human and everyone does that.
Yeah.
But overall, it was just, it was such a delight because everyone in that band equally cared about the end product and want to make sure that it was just a faithful recreation of this stuff that is deeply important to people. And everyone equally understood that there was not one person in that dressing room that didn't care, including the sound guy. The
Yeah.
sound guy was fabulous too. And he cared just as much. And he just, every night, his performance got better because he knew where all the highlighted parts were. And so that was a really, really special band to play in. And I remember just the last night, just we finished with Xanadu every night, and just we crowded around Troy on the drums
Yeah.
and just doing the shots at the beginning, dee doo dee dee doo doo boom, that part, boom boom, psh, and just we all had tears in our eyes because we knew this is the last time we are ever going to do this. And but it was so special that we got to do that, and it's almost like the audience didn't exist. It was just the joy of playing that music together, and it was oh yes, and there's also an audience. Hi everyone, and we kind of went back around, and it
Yeah.
was kind of special, almost humorous thing that happened.
And
But
then
just
of
that was
course
a really cool day.
let's not forget the We Are Getty Lee part to the
Oh, you
tune
were at
of
that night. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
We Are
okay,
Family by Sister Sledge,
okay.
except We Are Getty Lee.
I'm so glad someone remembers that. Yeah, that was just a spontaneous thing. I think that happened at Soundcheck one night, and because yeah, it took three people to be four people. There was the two singers, the bass, and the
Keyboards.
keys. Because
Yep.
yeah, Will Hare was on keys, Mark Annetta on bass,
Yep.
and so yeah, and that was just a gag that we did during Soundcheck one night, but we actually performed that.
Yep. That's right.
I forgot about that. That's
And
amazing.
and the kicker to all of this is that I sat there at that performance suffering from pneumonia.
Oh, poor
I
bastard.
was sick as a dog, but there was no way I was going to miss this. And I'll tell you, I was pretty miserable for a couple of days, but when you guys were on stage playing, it was all right.
Oh man, I'm so thrilled. Isn't that entirely what music is about? Is that no
Yeah,
matter
like
where you are,
it lifted
music
my spirits
just
hearing those
kind of.
songs come to life. And the other thing about that's great about classic albums live is by its nature, you know, you're going to hear songs that probably the band has rarely or in some cases never played because you're playing, you're not skipping, you're not, I don't want to do that one tonight. No, you're playing, if it's got 8 songs, you play all 8 songs. And then there's the, I wonder what, I never look up set lists online. I'm like, I wonder what they're going to do for a second one. I think you guys
Mm.
opened with La Villa Strangato, I think.
Yeah,
And I'm
I
like,
had
oh, nothing
yeah,
like setting the bar right
yeah.
there, right from the get go. Distant
You
Early
like
Warning was really cool. I remember thinking that
yeah.
was cool to hear live. And yeah, Bastille Day. I mean, I think I was starting to like fade at that point. It's like, I really got to get to bed. But when,
Oh no.
I was like, okay, I'm up. I'm in. I'm good.
That's so great. It's funny because I remember this the top of that second set. Yeah, what we had to do was because we're doing the album versions when they played that
Right.
live. I mean, in the early years, yeah, Alex would play that on electric, which is really great, like on
Yeah,
Stage
blistering on
Left.
Exit States Left. Yeah.
But I had the greasy stand up with the with the nylon, and it was just there for that one little. Oh no, and also the end bit of Temples of Searing. So I played
Right.
that guitar for maybe about 30 seconds of the gig, but it
Yeah.
was there just for accuracy's
Yep.
sake, and that was it. So as soon as that was finished, just the guitar got unplugged and taken off the stage, and that was it. But it was just so nice to properly play that song the way it is on the album,
Yeah.
and and Des did the first solo. I did it the first night, and just I didn't know it as well as him, but it was just, oh, you can do it, you can do it. And just after the first night, it was just, I don't want to do this. He said, yeah, I'd love to do it. He just, I forget who approached who, but just, he says, I can sing that solo. It's just, yeah, then please do it. It's one less thing
Yeah.
for me to worry about, because just because that was his period of rush. And I love doing the leads on the Signals, Grace Under Pressure period. So we just kind of doled out the parts equally. And he wanted to do that stuff. Just please, then just do it. Because I could learn this, but I don't want to labor over it. If you already know it, just great. One less thing
Yeah.
to do. And that, so it worked out so nicely. That's just kind of the right guy of the two of us played all the parts, and that just helped with that authenticity, because we both knew the solos we played inside out. And that's what made that so great, is that just everybody cared and just wanted
Yeah.
to sound good. There was no egos, there was none of that. We just wanted to sound good. And if he would make that sound better, or I make that sound better, or that person made that sound better, then great. We found a way to make it sound better. It was so great.
It was also good because I remember my daughter came with me to that show, and she just kept saying, "I hope they do subdivisions," and you did. So
Yes, we
that
did.
was, yeah, that was
Mhm.
really special. What
Right on.
other
I'm so glad you
shows
were.
did you?
Hmm?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
was suffering, but it was good. But what other shows did you do with? You're not with them now, or are you
No,
still?
no, 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 no.
No.
But I did Zeppelin 4
Yeah,
and Queen and Night at the Opera.
I've seen both of
And
those I've seen Night at the Opera twice at the this is all at the Playhouse in Fredericton. And I saw Zeppelin 4 once, so I don't know if that
well,
was you or not. But
could have
so
been. I was on Good Night at the Opera around 2012, 2013, and we definitely did East Coast in 2013. Or was it a bit later than that? No, I'm pretty sure it was 2012, 2013. Yeah, I was definitely on that. We did a bunch of dates on the East Coast, and because I've done that twice. I did that with 2112 as well. So if that was around that period, that was definitely me on guitar.
so I know that the first time I saw it was, I think, back in 2007. It was the oh his name went right out of my head. He's since passed away. Phil Narrow was on
Phil
vocals.
Nero, yeah, he
Yeah,
sang when we did it too. Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah.
then the
No.
next time I saw it was with Nick Walsh on vocals.
Oh, so that's later on. Okay, I see, I see. So
Okay.
maybe I was the one in between,
Yeah.
because yeah, we did it with Phil, and but it was definitely later than 2007.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great, and that was the same kind of deal. Just we performed just complicated stuff from the Queen back catalog. We did Brighton Rock, but not with a delay pedal. Greg Wired and I just played. He was the call and I was the response, and we
Oh,
just
so you
studiously
jigga
put
jigga
this
jig jigga
together.
jigga jig jigga jigga
Yeah,
jigga 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 jigga. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. We did that part, and
I
that was
I rem
tricky.
I remember
I
just being blown
arranged.
away by the Prophets song too, the
The
vocal
Prophet song was
section.
great,
Yeah.
but I think the most joyful part of that, though, was that we did Good Company properly, because there was
Yeah.
the Dixieland Jazz Band.
Yeah.
Because about a decade before that, they did a documentary on A Night at the Opera,
Yep,
and
I've
Brian
got
was
it.
a mixing board, so you've seen it. So he
Yeah.
isolates just the guitars,
Yep.
because what he was emulating was the kind of the George Formby
Yep.
Dixieland throwback thing, which kind of was popular in the late 50s. There was a resurgence of that, so he grew up with that stuff. So he wanted to arrange it with guitars. So there was a trombone and a trumpet and the
Oh,
clarinet part.
it was
So, and
so
thank God he
crazy.
did that on that
Yeah.
documentary, though, because he isolated just those three parts in stereo. So I transcribed the three parts and handed
Even
out three parts.
even the
Yeah. Oh, the
trombone part,
trombone.
like
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that
I
was
was trumpet.
fantastic. Yeah.
And yeah, remember, yeah, yeah. Greg Wired was did the trombone part. I did trumpet, and Des did the legato stuff for the clarinet part. So just did the charts and came in. We did it in sound check once and a rehearsal, and it was good. And we filmed one night, and I sent it to Brian, and he just said, "Thank you so much for sending me this, because I've never seen someone perform these parts properly."
Wow.
So yeah, so
I mean,
that was
that's
just
how much more
amazing.
of a seal approval do you need?
Yeah,
When
exactly.
doc
And
when
thank God
Dr.
we got it
May
right.
sa- when Dr. May says it's all right.
Yeah, no kidding. So that was really great, and we caught it on a good night, and it was pretty spotless. Because that's
Yeah.
the thing, you just the time you put when you play it every night. I mean, it's kind of going back to the Max Webster thing. When you're playing consecutive nights, the same thing, it gets better. I mean, imagine if we played that show 50 times. We only did it 10, 15, 20 times each time I toured with them. And just imagine if it was 50 times, how much better it would get. But even by night five, just it's tight, and it
Yeah.
is good. And but yeah, thank God that we got it on a good night on film. and the good doctor loved it. Just yeah,
Yeah.
life well lived. So yeah,
Amazing.
thank
Yeah.
goodness for that.
So Bob, what are you up to now? I want to give you the floor now.
Oh, goodness me. Well, I'm selling the copies of my book and I'm doing interviews like this. I'm kind of what's the euphemism in between projects.
There you
I
go.
I I moved to Montreal and just it's quiet, and I'm kind of happy for things to be quiet. I did the touring thing for so many years, and but the joys in writing now. I'm in touch with a literary agent, and I'm just trying to score a book deal. I've got all kinds of non-musical book ideas, and that's kind of where my head's at now. But I mean, but I still play the odd gig, and strangely enough, in Toronto where I left, I played there. I still do some session work. I've got people who send me their songs and I play on them and I send them my guitar tracks and they mix them back into their songs. So I'm still playing, but the craziness of the road and doing that stuff for 15, 20 years, just I'm good. And I mean, I would join a thing if somebody called, and mean, I would probably do it, I guess. But I'm just not actively seeking it because I did it for so long, and just I'm just sitting and watching the Olympics and having a good time, and it's I don't have that overwhelming urge to want to do what I did for 15, 20 years. So I'm kind of a freelance writer, freelance editor. I edited Jeff Wood's last book. I did that last year. And just that's kind of where my head's at. Just I'm kind of quietly somehow surviving still as a creative person. I've never had a job and probably never will. And and so I have enough freelance work between music and writing and editing, and I'm just kind of living the quiet life, and I'm still here, but just I'm not really out there as much as I used to be, and that's kind of by design. And that's probably the best answer I have for you. So, but I might be getting other music book projects. I mean, ask me in a year where I'm at
Right.
with that, because I got a kind of little irons in the fire. I have been approached by other artists who want similar books to be done on their lives. So we'll see if anything materializes, because of course the book gets around. It's kind of its own business card, which is great.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
so we'll see. Ask me in a year.
Well,
And not even for music books. I'm getting offers to do different kinds of books. Um, I had someone from the world of curling approach me about doing a book on the history of curling, and that's my all-time favorite sport. So maybe that will happen. So that's kind of what's going on. I'm kind of more in the literary world now than I'm in the music world, because I don't know. It's just nice to do something different. And so that's kind of where I'm happier. It keeps me at home and on the road for 6 months of the year. And and if I do end up on the road or on a cruise ship doing a job, I can still bring the computer with me and I can still work on it, I suppose. But yeah, waking up in the same place every day definitely has its perks, I've heard. And I'm starting to realize that now.
yeah. Yeah. So folks, high class. Uh, the definitive history of Max Webster, a band like no other. And as Canadians, we're proud to call them our own. But I'll have the link
Mm.
to order below. Bob, thank you so much for talking to me here. This was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. This was absolutely delightful. This was a very all-encompassing conversation. You made me think of things I haven't thought of in some time, which is what the best interviews and conversations are. So cool. Thanks for that.
Awesome. All right, everybody, check out Bob's book, but if you haven't, check out Max Webster. Go listen to some Max Webster for sure. We'll see you next time on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. See you later.